My name is Becca. I am the manager over at the Naperville store, and I have Maureen here. She's going to talk about landscaping for patio privacy. Maureen, you joined us like at least 5 years ago, right?
It will be 7.
7 years. So
Yep.
Maureen is in our tree and shrub department over at the Naperville store. And she knows all sorts of things. So I'm excited that she's going to be talking to you today. And if you want to go ahead and get started, we are ready to go.
Great. Thanks, Becca. Okay, like Becca told you, I work in the trees and shrubs department over at the Naperville location. So I'm going to switch to the next screen, but for some reason, it won't allow me to. So like I was going to say, I would have to say that the top list for most people when they come to the trees and shrubs department is that they are trying to create some sort of privacy in their backyard, whether it's that they want to, whether their neighbors are just a tad too close, or there might be an eyesore in their backyard or their neighbor's yard that they're trying to block out. Perhaps it's a trampoline or a swing set, or just something that they're trying to cover up. Or some people just want to create privacy because they want to make their own backyard a little bit as kind of their private oasis. And let's face it, a lot of us have been spending a lot more time at home these days, especially in the last couple of years. And we tend to, our living spaces have expanded to our backyard, and some people have been making their backyard as a expansion of their house in their living area. So you can form these privacy by either planting some trees, some shrubs, maybe a mixed bed with a combination of both things, or even different structures. So those are the things that we'll go over today, and hopefully you'll leave here with some good ideas. First, this is what I would have to ask you is, what is your goal for today? Right here, this is a clean slate, and you can tell what the homeowners here would want to screen their patio right here. And the adjacent yard, you can see that they do have a structure up, and that's how they blocked it out. So moving forward, I would just tell you to ask yourself some questions. What are the views that you're trying to hide? And consider, when you're considering what views you're trying to hide, consider it from which perspective. Are you trying to hide it from a kitchen window? Are you trying to hide that view from your patio? Are you trying to hide the view when you first enter your backyard? And then take into consideration, how does the whole backyard look as a whole? Is this something that maybe that obstruction isn't as bad as you think, or maybe it's as easy as just putting a different structure or a focal point. So consider screening for winter or summer views. A lot of people, I'm assuming that if you're here today, you're not here because you don't want to just plant a row of arborvitaes. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great way to create privacy in your backyard. But something you might want to take into consideration would be winter views. What would you see in the winter? So we have lots of trees or shrubs that still give us winter interest, even if it's not an evergreen. And will you still see your next door neighbors? Maybe, but it may not necessarily be so important because you're going to be inside anyways. So we could still create a hedge, or a lot of people, what they want is a mixed bed. So by doing a mixed bed, you might have some trees that are taller, and then you can complement it with some shorter shrubs, and then add the perennials as you want. So consider about how deep your bed might be. or how wide, and then how much space you have. Back to the original slide that I showed you, right here's an example of what a mixed bed might look like. So a tree was added, and that will definitely block out the view with some larger shrubs, and then a few boxwoods on the side, and then they can add any type of perennials that you might want to put around. Also taken to be mindful of any type of what your expectations might be. And I've had people before that they're so determined to put in a row of shrubs, but it's possible that the soil may not work or the space may not work, and it might just be the perfect situation where you can put a container. And or another example might be if you live in a condo and you have a balcony, that would be a good situation where you might want to use a container, fill it with any type of tree or any type of annuals that could still provide some type of screening. This slide right here, again, staying on the lines of expectations, a lot of people do want to plant really close to their patio. And I just wanted to show this to you because as you can see where the sidewalk was put in, look at the ground along the sidewalk. That is not going to be an ideal situation to plant any type of shrubs or perennials. They need the soil, whatever it is that you would choose, it needs to have better soil. And it would be mainly sand. So again, as I mentioned, sometimes the solution might be a focal point. And so a focal point, it's something that would draw your eye to it the first thing when entering or leaving the yard, or maybe the first thing you see when you look out your kitchen window. And these types of focal points, they usually look good in also the winter. So here we have a bird bath. It could be an arbor. It could be any type of cement with figurine, or whether it's a rabbit or what have you. But that's a good option if you aren't able to put any plants in the ground. This is another example with how things can draw your eye to the pots here with the annuals, and even with the different color of leaves. So a common thing that people always like to screen would be their utility boxes or your air conditioner. So and that's in this situation, usually I would say what works best would be to use either perennials or grasses. You don't want to have to dig a hole too deep where you would be getting in the way of any type of utilities, and we don't want to do that. Here is another example of where the eye is drawn to other things. You may not be able to see it, but right above the yellow shrub, there is a utility box. So as you're looking at this beautiful example of a mixed bed, you see that there is an evergreen, there is a large tree, and some shrubs. So you're looking at all those and you're not looking at the utility box. And at the same time, you've provided some screening or privacy in your backyard. So first, moving forward, let's talk about any types of trees or perennials that you can use. You can use one of them, or you can go ahead and create a mixed bed. So most of you, I'm assuming, are focusing on working in your backyard. And this is where I feel as though this is where you can have some fun. This is about your own style. Typically, front yards tend to be a little bit more formal, but this is where, you know what, you can plant and do whatever it is that you want. There aren't any guidelines or rules that you must follow. It's completely up to you. This is going to reflect how you like to design or how you like to, what colors you like. You might want to consider where's the placement of the grill. You don't want to plant anything too close to your grill, because that may not be good. So here's a row of, like I said, arborvitaes. Looks great, serves the purpose. It definitely creates some privacy. And here's an example where we have the row of arborvitaes. And then you see along the bottom, they've added some perennials. So we have our beautiful arborvitaes hiding the next door neighbor's fence. And eventually those arborvitaes will grow taller and you won't be able to see their swing set either. And then the eye is also drawn to the different perennials that are planted around. Like I said, it's up to you. This is your style of how you want to do it, but just a few things you may want to go by is, so typically we recommend planting in odd numbers. If you have just one plant of everything, it can be a little busy. So it's nice to repeat colors and maybe repeat the same plant in large groups, whether it's 3, whether it's 5. It's nice to use different textures. This picture here shows, looks like it's a spruce. So we have the nice blue contrast with the spruce. And then that would be lamb's ear with the fuzzy leaves. And then also consider winter interest. This is probably what some of us may have in our backyard today because it's freezing cold. So you still have that winter interest. So this patio right here, you can see it has a lot of the elements. We do have a couple evergreens planted, and then they added some nice texture with the grasses planted along the brick sidewalk. And they threw in some annuals to give it some color as well. Different types of arborvitaes. The emerald that we had at the beginning. Another example, this patio or this deck right here, this homeowner, lucky for them, their next door neighbor had these arborvitaes planted in their backyard. So essentially, she made her own mixed bed. So she's pretty much like borrowing her next door neighbor's arborvitaes. And then she added her own style. She added the red bud off to the side. She has the river birch, some nice shrubs in front. And then she added the begonias, and that is a nice focal point. That's probably what the first thing your eye is drawn to in that situation.
Hey, Maureen.
Yes.
There was a question about multiples of fruit trees. Does it depend on if it's pollinating or needs a pollinator or self-pollinating?
That would depend upon which type of fruit tree. Typically the crab apples, they do, if you want to get more fruit or more flowers, it does help if they have a pollinating tree. But it doesn't necessarily have to be planted in your yard. It may even be your next door neighbor's yard.
And then can you talk a little bit about siting your arborvitaes as far as on the edges where sometimes the swales are, and that's
okay. Yeah, that is a really good question. So I can give you lots of suggestions today. However, the one thing you need to consider is what are the conditions in your backyard. So, it goes with the whole the growing places message is plant the right plant in the right place and you will succeed. So generally arborvitaes, they like full sun to part shade, and they want a well-drained soil. So would that necessarily be the best place for an arborvitae? Not really. They don't want in the middle of a swale or swale. They're not going to perform as you would want them to. But there are other plants that we could definitely recommend for you. It might be a bald cypress that still gets a like the evergreen look, and still has some winter interest.
Could you also do like more shrubs like dogwoods in a wet area?
Yep. Yes, you can do lots of, you can do dogwoods. That would be something that would work in a wet area. Chokeberry could, and river birches also like wet, and that would be a nice way to fill in any area that you need. I'll give you some, I do have some examples that show where things that grow well in wet areas.
And then one more question before we move on. For a mixed bed hedge, are there standard guidelines for the width of it, depending on the size of the plant, depending on the size of the plants?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good question. So take into considering how wide is your bed. So what I would tell you is, all of our plants, we provide how tall they grow and about how wide they might grow. So for example, if you are going to put in some hydrangeas, depending on the hydrangea you chose, let's say you were to choose the limelight, and it grows about 6 to 8 feet tall and then 6 to 8 feet wide. So you want, and that's just the shrub. So that bed needs to be at least 6 to 8 feet wide. And that doesn't even include any trees that you have put in there. Okay. So here's another type of evergreen. This is the Chamaecyparis, which has a nice weeping look to it. I'll show you the bed as it adds texture to this mixed bed. Again, this is a nice mixed bed in a backyard. It's providing different interest because it has different textures. And I can tell that it would have different bloom times as well. That's something to consider. Over to the left of your screen, I can tell that that is a Rose of Sharon. So that would definitely be blooming in late summer. And then they have some other, it looks like Baptisia that would have bloomed in the spring. Another evergreen would be a juniper that does like it well drained. Something other than an evergreen is a tree. This is the tulip tree. In this situation, it's planted in the front yard, but this would be a great tree to plant at the end of your backyard if you're needing to maybe cover up whether if it's a street or a light post. And this one would bloom in the spring.
Maureen, a couple of questions. So there's recommendations for high windy full sun backyard. Would something like adding a tulip tree help create windbreaks?
Yeah, that would definitely work well. Tulip trees can handle the wind, and they would do well with the full sun too.
Anything else you could suggest for a windy full sun backyard if they didn't want a tree?
If they didn't want a tree, I mean, we can always go with structures, any type of shrubs that they would want that could tolerate maybe viburnum. So, but I'll be introducing more shrubs too.
Okay, and then one other question about arborvitae and how they are tasty to deer. Is there a way to protect, or are there arborvitaes that are not as tasty?
Okay, the one arborvitae that apparently the deer may not taste as good is the green giant. I know this is like, I have had so many customers come in about the deer destroying their arborvitaes. I mean, you could use some type of repellents. We do have things that you can put on your arborvitae. It smells, maybe that might help deter them. But I have heard some people have had success with the green giant. The green giant is giant. It can get up to 30 feet tall, but yeah, that I know that is a constant battle for a lot of homeowners. So here we have some low branch trees. We have a magnolia, and this is the weeping red bud. This magnolia can typically gets about 10 to 12 feet tall. So as you can tell, it blooms pink in the spring, and it serves a purpose in filling in that space right there. Okay, this right here, this is it's called the Fox Valley River Birch. This would be a good situation if you had a wet area. So it would thrive in that. It would do well with the sun, and you still get the winter interest because the bark is really cool. And it would fill in a huge gap here. The popular limelight, you can make any type of hedge out of any. These are the panicle hydrangeas. What's great about these is they like full sun. Can they handle a little bit of shade? Absolutely. But they do like well-drained soil. These are the Annabelle hydrangeas. These are the ones that definitely can handle a lot of shade. They can grow in full shade. And can they handle some sun? Yes, they might need to be watered a little bit more. But in this situation, they've created privacy by using the Annabelle hydrangeas. They have a couple trees, and then they planted their perennials around. So then you can see they hit all the elements between different colors. Even though everything is all green, it still looks very colorful because they use different textures, different shades of green, and even some chartreuse color. This is a hedge cotoneaster. This would yes.
What was the tree above the Annabelle hydrangea in that picture?
I suspect that these are the multi-stem redbuds. I can tell that the corner, that would be it looks like a type of river birch with the variegated leaf, but the other two look like multi-stem redbuds to me.
Thank you.
This forms a nice a nice hedge. I like how we have the fall color with it too. Here we have viburnum. I didn't put the size of the viburnum because we have so many different kinds. You might find some that can grow like 4 to 6 feet, and then we have some that could grow as tall as 10 to 12 feet. So depending on what would meet your needs. Most of them do also require well-drained soil, but there are a few that can tolerate it wet. Most of them require full sun to part shade. Let's see here. Again, this is the dogwood. It can handle it a little bit wet. It gets the pretty yellow flowers in the spring, and then the birds love the fruit that it might draw. And this can grow 10 to 12 feet tall, so that would fill in a nice gap. And this is what I mean about looking out your window. What is the view that you're trying to block, or what do you see? And even though it doesn't have any leaves on it in the winter, it still definitely creates some type of winter interest with the nice berries. This is what different branches of dogwoods look like. So like a cardinal dogwood, it would have red branches in the winter, and which gives your yard some nice character against the white snow especially. A couple other trees that have more of a columnar look to it. The purple beech is great. And the other one is the kindred spirit oak tree. I've had some customers get several, like 6 of the kindred spirits and plant them in the row, and it makes a very nice border. It gives it a little bit something different than planting the arborvitaes. And they get nice and tall, especially for some houses that are planted really close together. This is a nice way to break it up. And so this right here shows an example. These are all columnar hornbeams, and they were all planted in a row. And that gave you the privacy here. This is called Persicaria. This is actually a perennial. So we have this one planted at the Naperville location in the gardens, just right off of Plank Road. And this can grow really tall. It will be, you won't have anything in the winter, but it definitely serves the purpose that you're looking for in the summer without having to plant a lot of shrubs. Different grasses. And again, the different grasses, it's a great way to block any utilities. This one, it looks like they planted some grasses along the back of their townhouse, and it still has beautiful winter interest and texture. Here's another row of arborvitaes. This one, they did put some different perennials in front. If this is where you needed some suggestions, this would look beautiful in your backyard. But if you want, you could make the bed a little bit bigger, expand it out, and maybe put a row of shrubs in front of it. So that way you have that layered look. You would have the arborvitae with maybe get some shrubs that are maybe like 4 to 6 feet tall. It could be a hydrangea, it could be a viburnum, it could be dogwoods. And then you could put your perennials in front of that. Again, this is your backyard, it's your style. You can make it however you want. So you can also use different structures. Or you could do them all. This has a combination of a little bit of everything. They have the evergreen, and then they added different structures, which you can't see because the vines have grown up them. And then they have this nice little old-fashioned chair there as the focal point. This definitely gives you the illusion of privacy, a little nook in the back, and they have vines crawling up it, climbing up it. And then we have texture as well. Right here. They just put a pot here as a focal point. Another fence with different vines climbing up it to hide the fence. So our eye is drawn to the flowers instead of the fence or the green. This one has bamboo. Any different type of materials. You can't go wrong. It's completely up to you. Another situation of the house being just a little too close. So they did have their deck. I've seen people make their deck, and they can add on screens to put at the top so they don't feel like they're having coffee with their next door neighbors every day. Here they put an arbor above their deck, and they have different vines climbing up it. As we move forward, I do have other suggestions for vines that you can use if that's what people have questions for. They just put a screen there that's blocking out the neighbors, and with a little couch. So here is a trellis with some clematis. And off to the side is a little box that they're trying to hide. They can't plant too close to it, but we are looking at the plants that are planted there and not the box. A freestanding arbor. Right now, it looks like their vines are starting to climb up it. And I like the hedge of the boxwoods encircling it. So it keeps that, that hedge helps the, put some boundaries on that bed there. Okay, here's another arbor that has some clematis climbing up it. And so at the same time, you're showing interest, and you might be blocking a view, and your eye is drawn to that arbor right there instead of other things that you might be trying to hide. And it's a nice welcoming accent to your backyard. Here's another arbor. And that you see this patio, the type of privacy that they've created. There's no, they just added interest where they wanted to. So this, again, is about what is it that you like? What colors do you like? What textures do you like? A lot of what we've shown you hasn't been anything super fancy, but it works. And it has to be something that you're happy with. So there are different vines. Some are suckers, some are ramblers, and some are clinging or grabbers. So typically the ramblers would be the roses. Those are the ones that will just grow along a fence. You will need to guide them, the climbing roses, to climb up whatever structure it is. So here's an example. This one would be just growing along the fence. This is the hydrangea vine. This can definitely be an aggressive spreader, and it likes to cling on to any type of structure, and it does provide beautiful white blooms.
If you're at the Aurora store, you can see it climbing up one of our trees. It's a beautiful vine. It's a very strong vine, though.
Yes, yes. This is Virginia creeper. This shows it has some beautiful color. It can definitely spread. So if it's something that you don't mind if it's spreading, it will grow vigorously. And it also has the fruit on it for the birds and for winter interest as well. We have an example of ivy, which we're all familiar with, especially if you've been to Wrigley Field. I had to put that in there. I'm thinking spring. That's all I have to say. So here's more clematis along the fence. Trumpet vine. Trumpet vine is a great vine to grow on top of different structures. Be careful. The one thing I would caution you with is trumpet vine. It does need a strong support system, and it can get very woody. As you can tell, it's growing up this arbor right here, and that is part of the vine, the woody structure right there, wrapping around.
I think one of the real cautions is if you must really want it, because it's it likes to grow a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
It needs its very specific space where it has the right space.
Right, right. And here they have, I mean, you can see here the trumpet vine, it has wrapped around the arbor. It does become its own animal. It will take over, but it works. I mean, it's a great, if you love trumpet vine, the birds love it too. And here you can tell we have a little focal point with the bed bath. I mean, the bird bath. I'm still thinking of bed. And then, you know, hostas. This will add, it's a great way to add color to any of your beds, especially a shaded garden. And you can tell the next door neighbors, you can see how close they are to that house, but we're not looking at that because we're looking at the hosta garden. All right. I'm open for any questions you might have. I would just, you know, again, I would just recommend planting. Make sure you first know the conditions of your backyard, and then we can help you find what would be the right plant to grow in that particular space.
Do you have any recommendations for the best vine that you could put on a trellis in front of siding that won't cling to the siding?
I would say clematis. I think that one is the one that you would, it's not as aggressive as Virginia creeper or any type of ivy.
And then for clematis, it takes about what, 3 years for it to?
Yeah, I would say typically, and that's a good question, you know, especially when trying to keep your expectations, be mindful of your expectations. Really, any type of perennial, it takes a good 3 years for them to become established and flourish. And that would be true with the shrubs too, and the trees. I mean, those first couple of years, they need to be babied and taken care of, and then everything will go on, take care of itself.
A couple of questions on hydrangeas. Are there any that do better in wetter, shadier areas?
The best one that would do well in a wetter or shady area would be either the Annabelle, the Incredible, which is essentially the same thing as the Annabelle, but they have their stems are supposed to be a little bit more sturdy. Something else to consider might be the oak leaf hydrangea. Those can handle the shade, and they can tolerate a little bit of moisture too. And that's a nice option with the oak leaf, because they do have a really nice fall color too. And there are some oak leaves that can get pretty tall, like 6 to 8 feet tall.
And then somebody had a question about bloom months for hydrangeas and colors. We carry over 30 varieties of hydrangeas, and they all it's a whole class on itself. So
and Eric usually does do a class on that.
Yeah, in the summer we will have one. Do you what was I gonna? So typically, when do they bloom for the most part? And then to generalize that.
Okay, well, it depends upon which hydrangea, but they can start blooming anywhere in late June to July, depending on the type of summer that we're having. If it's been a warm summer. What else? Oh, about turning the blue color?
No, just a generalization of when they bloom. I think
what the nice thing about the hydrangeas, yes, they, depending on the type of weather we're having that summer, they can bloom as early as June and into July. And the nice thing about them is that they hold on to their flower. The flower doesn't just, you don't have it for 2 weeks and it's gone. It will hold on to that flower throughout the rest of the summer. And some people even keep them on through, and I do that through the winter, because you still have winter interests.
Yeah. Do you think back to the trellis and the siding, the distance the trellis should be placed from the siding? Like 2
I think you're fine. I'm not concerned about the distance you put the trellis to the siding. If you're using something like clematis. Yeah. I mean, some people have their trellises right up against their house. And that, I think that would be okay.
Okay, and then do you have any suggestions for under maple trees? My suggestion is a container.
Yeah, that's actually a very common question. A lot of maple trees, their roots are very shallow, and it's hard to find things that will survive underneath a maple tree, because those roots are going to take away all the water supply. So that is a good place. You can still make a bed. You can put mulch in that bed, and you can either put perennials, and I would say something that doesn't have a deep root system. That's what would do best underneath a maple tree. Or it might be a place to put a structure.
Like a bench or something.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Shady spot to sit.
Right.
Shrub recommendations for a focal point on a bed that goes around a patio in full sun. Like a small tree, maybe like a ornamental, like a hydrangea tree.
You could do that, a hydrangea tree. And you want this as a focal point as well?
Yes.
Okay. That would be nice, a hydrangea tree, maybe a red bud, any type of medium-sized tree could work. And then that tree would also give you some shade over your patio as well. We have lots of like crabapple trees. The crabapple tree could definitely survive the full sun, and you would get some nice interest with the berries and the flowers in the spring. Service berries are popular too. That would have a nice, you can get that either single stem or multi-stem.
Okay, a few more questions. So it's a partially shaded spot between an oak tree and a Hicks yew, like 4 to 6 feet tall, but it's not a very deep bed.
And it's a partially shaded spot.
We're just gonna do some put you on the spot marine questions.
And so it's partially, let me think here. It's the shade is where it can get a little tricky, because certain things, I mean, there are certain things that can survive and grow in full sun to full shade. Deer Villa, that's something that comes to mind. It is kind of like, some of us call it honeysuckle, but it's the fake honeysuckle. It's not the real honeysuckle. That can grow in full sun to full shade. It's called either Kodiak black, Kodiak orange, or the butterfly bush. Those all can tolerate the shade. The foliage may not, the problem that you're going to get with the shade is any type of shrub that you get that we say can grow in the shade, the foliage may not be as thick. It might be just a little bit more airy. The yew obviously works. Maybe the Karen rhododendron is pretty. It doesn't get super big, but it can tolerate some shade. It would need some sun in order to bloom though. And another way would be to add different perennials. We have a lot of perennials that can add color or texture and do well in the shade. Something that comes to mind, the Aurelia Sun King. That's like one of my favorite plants, and that will get like 3 to 5 feet tall, and it just adds great color to the backyard.
Yeah, the leaves are like a chartreuse.
I love it.
I can't say that word. Okay, so suggestions for tall, narrow things that can take some wet.
The bald cypress tree. We have one that doesn't get, a bald cypress can get really tall. We do have another one that does it more in the miniature size.
For a small backyard?
Yeah, that can work. The Lindsay, yeah, Taxodium.
Anything that would complement a hornbeam?
I think that would. I mean, again,
this is a separate question. Sorry, moving on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything that would complement a hornbeam. Is it a tree or a shrub? Well, first of all, a hornbeam, I think, is just such a all-around great tree. And I think anything would complement a hornbeam, really. I mean, yeah.
So if you have a hedge already in your yard and one of them has died and there's a hole there, what are some just suggestions to fill in that hole? If you don't
Yeah.
want to put another evergreen there.
Tricky. Yeah, this is where you can get creative. You maybe, is that a place that a trellis would fit? Is that a place that any type of arbor would fit? Or you could put a bird bath there. Yeah, that is a tricky situation. And I'll tell you, I often have people, when they come in, they have pictures. So bring a picture and we'll try to help you find something that would help solve that issue. Maybe a pot, and you can plant either perennials or annuals in that pot. And so then that way your eye's drawn to that and not the missing shrub that died.
Do you have any suggestions on how to break up a long fence that's under a lot of shade?
I've seen people put up birdhouses on fences to give it some decoration. You could put again, back to different trellises, and then you add clematis. That would break it up. What else? You can add any type of perennials that might grow up it as well. Really vines. That's what I would recommend, are vines to break up the fence.
What's a good shady vine?
The sweet autumn, and that's a type of clematis. And it can definitely be a vigorous grower. You may have different ones pop up in your backyard if you want, and if not, you just pluck.
There's also the summer snow clematis, which is a little less of a takeover, and it blooms a little earlier than the sweet autumn as well.
Okay.
Small patio trees that would provide shade. Any suggestions?
So typically, I would say one of the smallest trees we would have would be either the hydrangea tree or a lilac tree. We also carry the I'm drawing a blank. It's the willow tree, the small one with the
Oh yeah.
Why can I not think of it? It's the pink leaves and the
dappled willow. The dappled willow. Yes.
The dappled willow. Thank you. Thank you. I still have winter brain. The dappled willow tree. So those three, you're not going to get a ton of shade from them. The ones that you would get the most shade would probably be anywhere like something that would grow like 20 to 25 feet, which might be a red bud, a crabapple, the Newport plum tree, another medium-sized tree that you start to see. I feel like we're seeing more of is the lilac tree, the one with the white flowers, and that's a nice medium-sized tree, and that one you can definitely get some shade.
Ivory silk, correct?
Ivory silk, correct.
Just a couple more questions on hydrangeas. I believe this person has trouble with her macrophyllus not blooming. That's kind of standard for some of the macrophyllus. Don't they bloom on both new and old wood?
Right. Yeah, they do. What we recommend is first, don't prune them back until after you start to see new growth. That is That is another question we get a lot about, is why are my macrophyllias not blooming? So look to see if they're getting, I know they need some part shade, but they do need some sun in order to bloom. Could take into consideration, when are you pruning them? And I know some people may have gardeners who have pruned back their shrubs in the fall. And if that's the case, and they have pruned off the buds that I've already set.
An opposite question would be, so if you have an older hydrangea that the bottoms are kind of like woody and not like a sun, like a paniculata one, if you don't have any space to layer in front of them, can you prune them? Should you prune them to get them to reflesh out?
You know, the hydrangeas are very forgiving. If you want to prune them, you can prune them. If you don't want to prune them, you don't have to. It's all about how you want it to look. I have some of the paniculatas in my backyard. I have never pruned them once. I have a coworker that prunes hers every year because she wants them to be a certain, and I know she experiments, because sometimes she'll prune them and she feels as though on the times that she prunes them, she has a larger flower that year. So you're not going to kill if it's been there forever, you can just prune in early spring is what I would tell you, if you did want to prune it.
Okay. There's a question about protecting from rabbits, and my opinion is that you can fence them off or chicken wire them off as a true barrier. We do have some repellents that you can rotate in and out, because you can sprinkle on our plant skid, or but they get used to the taste and the smell, so you have to rotate out your products.
Yeah.
But fencing is your most surefire way to keep them out.
Yes. Or a fox.
Or a hawk.
That too.
So you gotta plant some trees so the hawks have a place to live. Okay, for a smaller space along a fence that's shady.
Okay.
It's to block a utility box, and anything that flowers blue. I don't know if blue is a hard color in nature. It's more like purple.
It is, and it's shady.
Yeah. Oh, Caryopteris is sun. Never mind.
Because of the shade, I do feel you could do Daravilla, which is a shrub, or I would probably I would direct you to perennials. There's goat's beard that can tolerate the shade. Again, the sun king that can definitely tolerate the shade. Astilbes. There's some astilbes that might get taller. And there are some grasses. They don't get as tall as the grasses that grow in the sun, but there are some grasses that you could use in the shade as well. In that situation, it might be something that you want a focal point to try to draw your eye away from the utility box too.
Okay, two more questions. One, ferns are good for shaded wet areas as well. Thank you, Susan. The best location for a Japanese maple, and maybe one or two plants that would complement them.
Japanese maples do like a little bit of shade. You don't want the leaves to get scorched by the sun, and they also need to be sited in an area that isn't too windy. Plants that would complement a Japanese maple. See,
probably depends on the leaf color of the Japanese maple.
Yes, and texture too. I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel as though pretty much anything. This is your backyard, and you can put anything. I like Fathergilla. I think that would be a nice shrub. The fothergilla that I'm thinking of is the blue shadow. It has like a bluish leaf to it, and it would look nice against the Japanese maple, whether it's a burgundy leaf or a reddish leaf. That might be some nice contrast.
Oh yeah, and their spring flowers are fun little white proof balls too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the last question, which is a good point, is how often should we be watering our new plantings?
Ooh, yeah,
Good question.
that's an excellent question. Okay, so we recommend at first that the first week of planting, that you check it every day. That doesn't mean that you water it every day, just check it every day. Put your finger down, we say at least 2 inches below the soil. If it's dry, then water it. If it's not dry, then do not water it. The second week, then we recommend that you check it every other day. And then the third week, every third day, and then moving forward, you're gonna wanna keep checking it throughout the summer, whether we've had rain or we haven't. And I tell people that you want to continue checking on like year 2 or year 3, because they're still growing and they need water.
Yeah, and even drought tolerant plants are not drought tolerant until they're established. So it's good to
Right,
check.
until they're established.
Okay, all right. That I think there's one more question about protecting small trees or large plants from cicadas next summer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
Is it a brood year next year?
it is. Cicadas are supposed to be what, 2024, I think. That's what I heard. And that is a really good question. There are different ways to, that's something that maybe we need to look in. Let me ask my manager, Eric, about, and of what would be the best way. So, and that's,
Oh yeah. And if you want to email
yeah,
any questions to grow@thegrowingplace.com, we can find out and get back to you as well.
I don't think the cicadas are as detrimental, but there are ways if you have a newly planted tree that you're concerned about. Yeah, that's something that we can look into further.
Great. Well, guys, we're so excited. We're opening in like a week and a half, and then you can come in and ask us all in person all these questions too. So thank you, Maureen, and
Yep,
everybody
thank
enjoy
you.
the day.
Thank you.